Wave flying, exploring high-performance flight in sailplanes. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Celebrating Aviation with Mike Machat. Today, we're going to look at soaring in the Sierra Wave, specifically setting altitude records high above the Sierra Nevada mountains. If you ever drove in the desert during wintertime out here in California, you'll notice occasionally there are clouds that look like this. It's like a UFO, kind of a flying saucer, flat lozenge-shaped cloud. As long as the wind is blowing during the daytime, the cloud actually stays stationary. It doesn't move. And it's a unique phenomenon that you see here in California, also in Colorado. What's happening is that the mountain wave, which again is in the wintertime, is generating a huge amount of lift being deflected against, in this case, the Sierra Nevada mountains, and in Colorado, the Rockies, of course. But you're looking at a lenticular cloud. It's better known as a LENI, and that signals the presence of a wave. Here you look at the wave conditions. What's happening is the wind is coming in off the Pacific Ocean, striking the mountain range and being deflected upward at tremendous rates of speed and with tremendous power. The top of the Sierra Nevada wave has been estimated at 60,000 feet. But the area just in the lee downwind area behind the mountain is very, very turbulent and generates energy up to 20 Gs or more, which is enough to rip an airliner apart, which unfortunately has happened. But in a sailplane, you're flying much slower. You're flying at 40 or 60 miles an hour, accelerating up to 100, and you can get through the rotor and up to the smooth air and really start a significant wave flight. Let's take a look at some of the altitude records that were set in the Sierra Wave. The oxygen systems that were developed during World War II were applied to gliders, and they were able to set high altitude records. In 1949, a sailplane went to 33,000 feet. In 1950, 42,000 feet. 44,000 feet in the Sierra Wave project, which I'll talk about in a moment. 46,000 feet in 1961, and that record stood for 25 years and was broken in 1986 with a flight to 49,009 feet, the highest altitude achieved in the mountain wave by a sailplane. I'd mentioned the Sierra Wave project, and that was a program in 1952 that was jointly sponsored by the Army, Navy, Air Force, NACA, which is NASA today, and civilian soaring pilots who all pooled resources to study wave conditions and improve aviation safety in wave flight. And the four pilots that we see here were Larry Edgar, Ray Parker, John Robinson, and Dr. Joachim Kuttner. Here we see a picture of Joe standing next to the Pratt Reed, which was a specially instrumented two-seat side-by-side World War II trainer that was outfitted for the Sierra Wave and later the Jetstream project. The Pratt Reed that you see here, a 1940s design, and I talk about training glider and sailplane records, and let me explain the difference between a glider and a sailplane. A glider, by technical definition, is a motorless aircraft that is capable of controlled flight from its release point, either behind an airplane or from a winch tow or a car, down to a landing position. A sailplane, by comparison, is a high-performance glider that is capable of flight above its release point using thermal, wave, ridge, or shear line lift to maintain flight and gain altitude above its release point. In 1952, again in the Sierra Wave program, Larry Edgar and Harold Clyforth, flying the Pratt Reed, reached a certified altitude of 44,255 feet. This amazing photo is the first one ever taken from that altitude from a glider. And here's a series of LENIs depicting a really powerful wave condition. This was taken on April 25th, 1955. And in this wave, Larry Edgar, flying the Pratt Reed, wound up in some severe rotor turbulence, and the airplane was literally just torn apart in midair. Luckily, both pilots were able to parachute down and survive the accident. But what you see here is a piece of the airplane. This is not impact damage. This is a piece of the machine that literally floated to Earth in the desert. On February 25th, 1961, Paul Bickel, flying a Schweitzer single-seat 123, set the altitude record of 46,269 feet, which, as I mentioned, stood for 25 years. Paul Bickel was a major force in American soaring. His accolades included being a national champion sailplane pilot, president of the Soaring Society of America, captain of the U.S. soaring team, high-performance sailplane pilot, and his day job was a NASA program director at the Dryden Flight Research Facility at Edwards Air Force Base. Paul was in charge of the X-15 program. The sailplane he flew was based at Fox Field up in Lancaster, and it was a modified 123. It had special aerodynamic fairings, fitted with an oxygen system and full instrumentation. Here's a beautiful plan view showing the elegant lines of this airplane, which was a late 40s design by the Schweitzer Company in Elmira, New York. This color photo was taken after Paul Bickel's record flight. And you notice on the forward fuselage, there's a what they call a Lenny pin or Lenny insignia, which is indicative of the Lenny program by the Soaring Society of America, which awards 1, 2, or 3 Lenny pins for flights above 20, 30, and 40,000 feet. In 1984, the Soaring Society commissioned me to paint Paul Bickel's record, and we decided on a view looking up at the airplane at the moment that he deployed the spoilers at the very top of the record flight, knowing that he was ready to descend. And first order of business was to define Paul's figure in the cockpit. Even though we were only going to see his face, the helmet, and mask, I wanted to make sure that it was situated correctly in the cockpit. So this is a cutaway view. And this is a detail of the actual painting. You can see the canopy is iced over. Even the clear view panels are iced over. And there's the painting entitled Flight Level 460, the moment at which Paul Bickel deployed the spoilers to start descending from the peak altitude. And he mentioned from the moment that the spoilers deployed until he actually noticed descent on the variometer, he had gained another 2,500 feet. On February 17th, 1986, a pilot named Bob Harris, flying a Grobe 102, set the ultimate sailplane world altitude record of 49,009 feet in the Sierra Wave. Here we see Bob on the right. Bob is a second-generation resident of Riverside, California. His family had a metal supply business for construction. And the gentleman you see on the left is Jim Meyer. Jim is a former Air Force pilot, flew in the Vietnam War, and then flew the Lockheed U-2C model photo recon high-altitude aircraft, had extensive experience in high-altitude flight. Jim and Bob together flew a 2-seat Grobe over a number of years to develop Bob's experience, and they reached mid and high 30,000 feet altitudes and actually got above 40,000 feet on one of the flights. But to set the record, Bob had set a goal of breaking Paul Bickel's record, and he bought a single-seat Grobe 102 Aster and outfitted it with a dual MD2 high-pressure oxygen system and instrumentation in order to achieve that record flight. On the fateful day, on February 17th, 1986, Bob launched out of Cal City and flew northward toward Inyakern, entered the wave, and then went to 49,009 feet. Here we see a detail of a photo that, again, was taken during that flight. And you can see, looking north toward Owens Dry Lake, the dust cloud being kicked up from the really severe winds, even on the surface. And there's those clouds that you see there looking like biscuits, as Bob described them. After setting the record, he had to land at Inyakern. The headwinds were too severe for him to make it back to Cal City, even from 30,000 feet. So he landed at Inyakern and called for a tow plane to take him back to Cal City, but not before getting this photo of Bob sitting on the wing in his thermal suit. The outside air temperature at that altitude can be as much as minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Bob's record was broken in 2006 by NASA pilot Einar Einavoldsen and Steve Fawcett. flying a two-seat Perlin 1, wearing pressure suits in the Argentine Andes. They went to 50,720 feet. Here's a picture of the two pilots in the Perlin 1 in South America. And that record was broken a number of times by the Perlin 2, which was a composite sailplane built by Airbus. Former Air Force test pilot Jim Payne and his co-pilot Tim Gardner flew that airplane in a series of records in the high 50s, low 60s, and eventually up to 76,000 feet pressure altitude in what was called the polar vortex, which is a very powerful jet stream system generated near the South Pole. The Perlin 2, built by Airbus, is a very advanced sailplane, but the secret to this whole project is that the sailplane, which you see here from the tail cam on its way up on one of the flights, is fully pressurized. And so Jim and Tim, seen here, can fly in relative shirt sleeve comfort in a pressurized cockpit. And they intend to go ultimately to 90,000 feet, which they feel is the limit of the polar vortex. Well, they say that your life can change in one phone call. And that phone call came in 1991. I was sitting at my desk in my office. The phone rang, and it was Bob Harris. And he introduced himself and said, "I understand that you're the artist that painted Paul Bickle's record. I want you to paint my record as well." And I was truly honored. So that began a long friendship. And Bob and I got to know each other, and we started discussing the project. First order of business was to get in a 172 out of Cal City and go fly up to the Owens Valley and take a look at where everything happened. Bob described the record in vivid detail, described the conditions, his memories of the experiences and sights and sounds and how everything worked. And so as we started to piece the painting together, he was describing the day of the flight. He had some very good friends at the University of California, Riverside science department. They had a weather station, and he would call in the wintertime every day for the better part of, I want to say, 5 years, waiting for the perfect conditions. And on February 17th, 1986, he called and they said, "Bob, today's the day." That day, that morning, they'd actually scheduled, Bob and his wife, Susan, had scheduled to go pick up a new dog. And Susan, being the understanding Soaring wife, said, "Bob, you go fly. I'll pick the dog up." Bob headed to Cal City, and the rest is history. So my job was to sketch in the weather conditions and show the wave as Bob was describing it over the background scenes that I'd photographed during our research flight. And then, like the Bickle painting, Bob wanted to be looking up at his sailplane, but there was a distinct difference. He wanted the airplane to be very small. This painting was about the scene of the record. And in a 30 by 40 canvas, the wingspan of the sailplane was 4 inches. But it was fully detailed, as you see here in this close-up. The painting itself is hanging at the Udvar Hazy Center at Dulles Airport. That is a part of the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. The painting was in an exhibit on the main facility on the Mall in Washington, D.C. in 2016. But today it is in permanent display in the conference room of the Udvar Hazy Center. And Bob's airplane was donated to the museum as well. If you stand in the main gallery and look at the SR-71, which, by the way, routinely flew at 90,000 feet, look up to your left and you'll notice Bob's airplane is hanging from the ceiling in the Udvar Hazy Center. Oh, and by the way, Bob and Susan went and got the dog that morning. They named it Lenny. Special thanks to Bob's wife, Susan, and Jim Meyer, who's become a good friend over the years. And I'd like to dedicate this presentation to the memory of Bob Harris, who passed away 1 month after the Perlin 2 went to 76,000 feet. Hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.